Oi, you lot, we have a video on our hands today. This one is it's quite close to home, to be honest, because I think this is the most important thing when it comes to property development, business in general, to be honest. And that's what the title is: How I Raised £10,000 in 10 minutes. Now, you might be thinking, fucking hell, like, how is that even possible? Blah, 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 this and that. And I get it. It doesn't make sense logically, but once I break it down, you just understand it, basically. I haven't started a bit there. But raising the 10 grand in 10 minutes is not to say that you're going to go out there and be able to do the same off the bat, but I will explain how I did it, all right, the steps that I took before to put me in a position to be able to raise that type of money within 10 minutes. I think it was even less. It was literally like after like a 2-minute conversation, I raised the money. But there's a couple of key concepts that I want to forward towards all of you, and basically should pay attention to all of the things that I explained leading up to the actual result of me actually raising the money. So the main thing, the first thing anyway, that I wasn't aware of at the time, but retrospectively I can look back and say this was one of the most important things for me to be able to raise it, was by just getting started with what I had around me. Much of what we'll achieve, right, comes from utilizing the things immediately around us today. Right? And there was a quote, I actually read it earlier this morning. It was kind of perfect with me recording this video. It's Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations. He said, "Do what nature demands of you. Get right to it if that's in your power." So basically, just get started right away. Right? Like, we all have the ability to get started. Don't await the perfection of Plato's Republic. That part isn't really relevant, but be satisfied with even the smallest step forward. Now, in the context of this, because I've been documenting my journey for God knows how long now, probably 2020. When did I buy the first house? I think around 2022, end of 2022, maybe 2023, actually. I just started documenting things as they were happening, right? Like, I didn't seek perfection. I kind of do, but it doesn't really exist, right? So I was just getting started with what I had around me at the time, like showing viewing, showing me running numbers, what I'm doing, just showing what I'm doing, right? Becoming more visible. And progress compounds on top of each other, right? The more you put out there, the more visible you are to potential investors. That's what you need to look at it as. So even though we want things to be as polished as possible before we put it out there, naturally, because, you know, we're conscious of what other people might think, and we just want to show our best selves, right? Like, that's all Instagram and that really is in this day and age. It's just people just showing off their best self, but that isn't real. So when you come along, right, and you almost go against the grain and just show what everybody deals with, because behind the veneer of like perfection, everybody goes through the same type of shit. Everyone's still trying to figure things out, right? So the more you show that, the more people can relate. And remember in the other video when I said that all raising money is getting somebody else to basically just know, like, and trust you, right? The more you put out there that demonstrates imperfection, that you're on a journey, the more people are able to, number one, feel like they know you, and number one, like you, right? If you think about it like this, when it comes to your, let's say, like your favorite movie or somebody that you really looked up to growing up, the reason why we gravitated towards that person so much is because we saw ourselves in them. And it's the same type of thing with this. If other investors can see themselves in you, they're more likely to buy into whatever it is that you're doing. So just bear that in mind. Get past the mental inertia of thinking that things need to be polished and perfect, and just get going, right? Because the more you do, right? The more you do, the more you can iterate, and the better you'll become. It's like we just think things will magically become perfect without doing any sort of action, content wise, outside of content, reading, whatever it is, playing some type of sport. You have to go through the drudgery of it being basically just shit, right? Like the tedious part to get to the perfection that we always seem to seek. So that was a big thing for me. But the beauty of it was, I had people holding me accountable anyway, so it wasn't really hard for me to just stay consistent documenting. And with me documenting what I was doing, it ended up generating a lot of interest. Like I just kept it against the grain. I was just talking about things that went wrong, talking about lessons that I had learned, but at the same time, displaying and demonstrating my competence, because all of you should know at a level things will go wrong, right? It's not even being negative, it's just being realistic. You know, it's statistically like 80% of businesses fail, I think, in like the first year or first 10 years or something. So that just goes to show the majority of things we do will fail or will go wrong. So it's not about not making it go wrong, but it's how we deal with it when it does. So the more you can just show that, right, and demonstrate your ability to handle it even when things are going wrong, that shows the mark of a true a winner. I can't lie. If somebody was documenting themselves going through a bunch of shit, and then in that same breath in lifetime they make it out of that scenario and they're showing how they've done it, fucking hell, I'll give them all my money and say, yeah, you know. Never actually invest all of your money into anything, but it's the point that I'm trying to make. So documenting your imperfection, it essentially just builds trust. It builds trust. So just start now and get better along the way, right? And so if this particular investor that I'm talking about, he was one of my first ever ones, right? He had lent me, it was 10 grand at the time. And then after a few months, I had repaid him his initial capital, right? I even repaid it early. So he didn't get to receive all of the interest that he was basically contracted to. But because I didn't need the money for that long, it was like, cool, you know, let me just repay it early, right? Because what I've come to find is that any investor's biggest worry or doubt is not, you know, earning money on top of it. Of course, like that's the thing, we all want to earn money, but it's, will I even get my money back in the first place? It's like you can promise to give someone, you know, double the amount that they give you. Like if they give you 10 grand, you can say you're going to give them 20 grand, but how certain even is that, you know? So what I've found is that a lot of them value certainty over, I'm just going to call it like a dream. So the point that I was making was this investor gave me 10 grand, and then I think about 1 or 2 months later or something along those lines, I gave him back the 10 grand plus, I think it was like maybe £200 or something. Like it wasn't crazy by any means necessary, but what it did do was demonstrate trust, right? And even though he didn't earn £1,000,001, I basically displayed my ability to follow through and just say, look, like, yeah, cool, you've given me money, I've used it, I don't actually need it any longer, so here it is back. And there was a story in the 48 Laws of Power, I believe the guy's name was Meyer Lansky, if I'm not mistaken. Meyer Lansky was almost like a mob boss, or like a mob financier. And then there was a fella who basically came into his office, right, and he pitched to him this idea that he had, and he wanted to borrow some money, saying that he could make however much amount, blah, blah, blah. So then Meyer Lansky, bearing in mind, this guy is a mob boss, like he's connected, he's tapped in, so crossing him, that could very much just end your life, right? Now, this guy, he took the money, and then the next day, I don't know what happened, maybe he had a revelation, he was thinking, fucking hell, like I'm not actually cut out for this, or I don't think I can actually, deliver the goods. Whatever reason or rationale he had, he went back the next day and basically just said, yeah, look, like thank you for the money, blah blah blah, but here's the amount back, right? So he gave the guy Meyer Lansky, he gave the money back and basically just said like, yeah, I don't think I could follow through, blah blah blah, what I was saying, whatever. And then Meyer Lansky, he was like, fucking no, like, most people, if I give them money, they'll just fuck off and run away, and then I have to chase them down or anything. But you actually came back and gave me my money back, and that made him trust him 10 times more. Even though the guy didn't, make some elaborate business and paid him 10x, 5x, 2x or whatever. The mere fact that he just returned the money was proof enough to Meyer Lansky that this guy is actually trustworthy and honorable. And it's just that level of certainty, because the majority of people walking on this earth, if you gave them money, that's the last thing you'd hear from them. They just fuck off, right? So if you can be almost like the black sheep and just repay what you owe, I promise you, that in itself will just market for you for more investors. So I say that to say that happened, right? This was like about a year ago. And then the trust, that built the trust before I ended up facing another scenario where I actually needed more money, right? And I ended up going back to the same person. So what later happened was one of the costs on one of my projects drastically increased, right? I think it was by about 12 grand or so, maybe just under. I forgot the exact amount, but I remember I was kind of stressing. I was thinking, fucking hell, like, what am I going to do, right? And then I thought about this investor that I had repaid, and I thought, fucking, let me just give him a call. So I called him and I explained the scenario to him and how much I needed. If I still have the screenshot, I'll put it up on screen. It was a while back, so I probably don't, but it was, I believe the phone conversation was maybe like a minute 45 seconds, right? It was just me explaining what had happened, how much I needed, and when I needed it by. That afternoon, he sent me £10,000, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, it was almost surreal, right? And it just proved to me that as long as you do all of the right things, so remember the first thing I said, documenting your journey. How I even came about this investor was by just documenting what I was doing, not daily, but consistent enough for him to feel like he knew me, right? So that was step number one. Step number two was I then demonstrated my trust by repaying him money that he had given me, right? Within the time frame that we had agreed. Although it was less money, the fact that he got the money back was all the proof in the world that he needed. And then number three, this is something that's super, super, super important, because I recognize it in myself, so it might even be in some of you as well. Sometimes we're not audacious enough, or maybe we're fearful of, just putting ourselves out there. And when I say putting ourselves out there, I don't mean in the context of posting content, that's one thing, but in the more direct approach of actually reaching out and asking. So one of my major blockers when it came to raising money was reaching out to people and literally just asking, because, don't know, maybe it's like some subconscious thing that I don't like asking for help, but that was a major thing for me to overcome. But when I did overcome it, what I found was a lot more people were willing to, number one, help, and number two, people have more money than you genuinely think. So the only way you'd find that out is by being audacious enough, right? Having the audacity to just put yourself out there and ask. So even me making that phone call, it's having the audacity to do it. So never, it's something that I find myself explaining to people a lot of the time, and I even have to remind myself of it. Never tell yourself no. Meaning, don't convince yourself not to do something or not to take an action because you think that the person might not have the money, or it's not going to work anyway. Let them tell you no. So make the call, or send the message, right? Because you might be very surprised by the outcome. Just think of it like best case, worst case. Worst case, they tell you no. Best case, you've got flipping money in the bank, right? And then that brings me on to this next point of being patient with the outcome, but urgent with the process or your actions. So you see, like the saying, patience is a virtue. I like to say urgency is a virtue, right? Because we want to be patient with the things that we can't control, but the things that we can, we need to be bullish as hell. And it's something that to this day I still coach myself into, because I'm naturally laid back in nature, right? But we need to be urgent with the things that we need to move forward and make progress. Because fucking hell, like, we want to be rich whilst young. No one's trying to be rich when they're older. But in order for that to happen, we need to be urgent with the things that we have to do that are within our control. So the documenting of our journey, the reaching out to people and asking for help, or offering opportunities to people, all of these things that are within our control, we want to make sure that we're proactive with and doing. And then the things that we can't control, like people actually giving us the money, or how many people respond, or how long it takes to buy a house, right? Those things we just be patient with, understand that there's a process to it, right? But the things that are within our control need to go hell to leather. Hell to leather or hell for leather? Hell for leather. We need to go hell for leather on making it happen. So yeah, the results will come later. The consistency comes now. As long as you're always tracking your inputs, the output will eventually come. And that's why they say failure is only failure when you accept it, when you accept defeat, right? You fail your way to success. You reach out to people, they tell you no. You post content, it doesn't do well until it does, right? But if you only post the one and then you stop, then you failed. So failure is a choice, in my opinion. But that's ultimately the process that I went through in order to raise the money in 10 minutes. It wasn't even 10 minutes, it was like a minute, if I'm being completely honest. Like, that phone conversation was so short and so sweet. But that happened only as a result of the things that I mentioned before, right? Staying consistent with documenting, being visible. I promise you, social media, when used correctly, it's a superpower, right? It's a superpower. So being consistent in that sense, demonstrating trustworthiness and credibility, which ties in with the content, being audacious enough to ask, put yourself out there and ask. And then lastly, it's being urgent with your inputs, but then patient with the results and the outputs. As long as you always track what you are able to do, right? How many pieces of content you post, how many messages you send out, etc., the result will come as long as you continue to persist. But that's the difficult part, continuing to persist when you don't have the result to almost substantiate why you should continue to persist. And that's where mindset comes into it. But this isn't a mindset video. So yeah, that's exactly what I did. Any questions down below, then feel free to ask away. I'm going to be posting again on Sunday. I don't know what the video will be about yet, but look forward to seeing you lot then. Closing reminder is, I have a couple notes here. It says you don't raise money with tactics. I had written down, you raise it with character, consistency, and courage. I like that, the 3 C's. Character, consistency, courage. Remember, courage, interchangeable with audacity. Consistency, just showing up every day, or, at least a few times a week, posting content or whatever. Every day, ideally. And then character, just being trustworthy. I promise you, like, you guys will probably know, right? People are just scumbags when it comes to money, especially. I don't know what it is. Like, people's characters tend to be rotten. So if you can just be honorable, right, be trustworthy, you'll go so far. Like, much of what you achieve will be a result of just being upstanding and honorable and honest, to be honest. So yeah, the three C's: character, consistency, courage. The other point I'd written down was your next investor might already be watching. You never know. So put yourself out there. Right? Put yourself out there and see what happens. Start, document, and stay human is another point I'd written down. And then finally, when it's time to ask, they'll already know that you are real. So go out there, take action, make things happen, so that you can raise 10,000 in 10 minutes, maybe even 100,000 in 10 minutes. You never know. So see you lot Sunday. The next video, if you have anything that you want me to cover specifically or talk about or elaborate on, let me know down below. Other than that, like, subscribe, comment, and I will see you all later.